Good morning. Please be seated. Words matter. Quite the gospel reading we have today. It's an interesting pairing, isn't it? Our collect begins with instructing us to use Jesus as an example, using Jesus' godly life as an example. And we have this story of the Canaanite woman and Jesus' treatment of her. Interesting pairing. Words matter. Katie, an 8-year-old child of a friend of mine, is an easy target for emotionally immature children to pick on and bully. Children being children, a gang mentality is easy to develop where she is taunted by many, not just one bully. Children can be so unthinkingly mean sometimes, and that's why parents and those in authority over them, where training is so important. And sometimes it seems to me that the most loving word in the English language is no. As we grow and mature and gain emotional intelligence, as we recognize that immature behavior for what it is and the harm that immature behavior can cause, that comes to us as we grow and learn. My friend's daughter, Katie, is, as you might imagine, not only sensitive, but bright and funny and lively, and her parents worked very hard at softening the hurts caused by a few of her classmates. Words matter. Our gospel focuses on two seemingly disparate stories involving Jesus and language, among other things. But that's what I'm going to focus on. And Matthew is doing something artfully beautiful here. And we need to put this gospel in context to see that beauty. So there are two parts. Part one. And just before the start of part one in this gospel today, the Pharisees have criticized Jesus for allowing his disciples to eat without washing their hands, pointing to the purity laws. The purity laws were not just about food, but about racial purity as well. And these purity laws dominated first century Christian life, setting those who practiced them apart from those around them, helping to mark them as different, special, and those who practiced the purity laws, making them feel superior to others. Jesus getting rid of, abrogating those rules, as he does in part one today, is considered by those temple leaders as outrageous conduct. Yet that abrogation is not really the point Matthew is making. Jesus is focusing on a person's heart. A person's heart. Jesus is saying that rules and regulations are a means toward religion, not religion itself. And that our words and actions are more important than those rules and regulations, as those rules and regulations have the power to defile, hurt, and remain, to and with others as well as to and with ourselves. Then the gospel moves and shifts to the Canaanite woman, part two, and the horrible manner in which Jesus and the disciples treat her. The disciples malign her, and they tell Jesus to send her away, and Jesus ignores her and calls her names, and honestly is horrible to her. How is this the Jesus we know? I could see Kathy reading it going, I don't want to read these words. There's a long and sordid history between the Israelites and the Canaanites. Racial stereotyping and bigotry and cultural, religious, geographic superiority. The Canaanites were considered idol worshipers. Yet the Canaanites were there when Joshua led the conquest of that land. Culturally, ethnically, religiously different, the Canaanites were from the Israelites. And Matthew has Jesus play into that habitual treatment, that understanding that Jesus and the Israelites are are racially, ethnically, religiously superior to this Canaanite woman, who, in reality, was simply a woman with a sick child seeking help, any help for her daughter. And here is where these two parts of this gospel tie together in a beautiful way. Matthew is using Jesus and his disciples as a foil, or as foils. Jesus and the disciples' initial response to this Canaanite woman highlight the point of what Jesus said before. Words matter. Actions matter. Jesus and his disciples are defiled, hurt by their words and actions, as is the Canaanite woman who doesn't take it. She doesn't give up. Who, like a parent with a child acting inappropriately or asking for something unhealthy, she says no. She says, I'm not taking no for an answer from you. Right here, Matthew is tipping his hand as to what's coming next, to where this gospel leads and ends. And where it leads and ends is that this gospel is for all, not the select few to whom Jesus alleges, and what he says, I came to save a few. And Matthew is saying by this Canaanite story, the end of the Canaanite story, tipping the hand that this gospel is not for a few, it's for everybody. Jesus, Matthew, is moving his mission beyond his religious and cultural traditions he's moving it to the marginalized and the rest of the world. The way the Canaanites were treated by the Israelites was not unlike how most conquering nations treat those conquered through history. The development of the belief of racial and moral superiority, a better than mentality, is a human failing we see throughout history. Some group believing they are better than another. This is the direct opposite of Jesus' message, his teachings, his mission, his ministry, as summarized, or that's brought together in Matthew's gospel in its entirety. We see the failing in our history, in the sinful promulgation of the slave trade, our treatment of our indigenous sisters and brothers, and the reservation system, and the systematic violation of treaties. The legacies of this history continue to impact us today. On Facebook, there is a woman who writes daily what she calls Letters to America. Her name is Heather Cox Richardson. If you don't know her, look her up. She's fabulous. She wrote a really good one today. But we see racial purity, racial superiority in the rise and reign of Nazi Germany. We have elements of that cancer in our country right now, with the white supremacist groups and the domestic terrorism they espouse, rooted in this human tendency to want to be better than someone who is different. Words matter, actions matter. In summary, Jesus' life and ministry are focused on love and loving neighbor as self, focusing on those in need, lovingly chastising those who go astray, and keeping moving forward. All focused on the reign of God. Nowhere in the gospel of Jesus is there a mandate from God that one race is superior to another. Nowhere in the gospel of Jesus is there permission granted to hate, be violent. To be a follower of Jesus, we are called to say no. No to those who profess racial supremacy, bigotry, misogyny, homophobia, Islamophobia, anti-Semitism. To those who preach fear of the other and have this idea that someone has supremacy over someone else. be a follower of Jesus, we are called to say no to any elected leader who does not have the emotional intelligence to know that words matter. Hate speech is wrong no matter the format in which it is delivered. And then calling leadership to task for their words and actions and being the loving, welcoming people God made us to be is meant that we are not to pander to our lesser angels. That's the call of this gospel passage. Words matter. Actions matter. There are concrete ways we can live into this gospel. We can contact local and federal elected officials and tell them to say no to the kind of behavior that is empowering domestic terrorism. And demand that they act on it by passing appropriate legislation. Standing by as an observer is not sufficient. Don't take this quote I'm going to give you right now too literally. Dietrich Bonhoeffer said, quote, "If I sit next to a madman as he drives a car into a group of bystanders, I cannot, as a Christian, simply wait for the catastrophe, then comfort the wounded and bury the dead. I must wrestle the steering wheel out of the hands of the driver." Unquote. If you don't know who Dietrich Bonhoeffer was, he was a Lutheran pastor executed by the Nazis for being part of a plot to assassinate Hitler. Words matter. It is our obligation to work to build the reign of God that Jesus opened for all of us and to say no to those whose words and deeds impede the building of that reign. Acting in a nonviolent manner to effectuate that result. We are called by God, by this gospel, and by our baptismal covenant, in which we say regularly, we strive for justice and peace and to respect the dignity of every individual. By the gospel, by that baptismal covenant, we are called to action and the proper usage of words. Amen.